What is up, everybody? Zach here. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. Soon to be Happy New Year to everybody. Took a little bit of a break. Now I'm back. We had the Christmas holiday I had to get out of the way. I was supposed to have ridden a couple times. Couldn't get into it because of the rain, the snow, the ice, all sorts of that stuff. I want to just show you a few things you want to check on your bike after a few months of riding. Every month if you can get to doing it. If you guys saw my last video.
Oh, that's loose. Oh, that's loose. Well, I guess that means I got to go over the whole bike.
You notice that I had a loose bolt on the rear of my bike. Just want to go through and skim through and just show you guys some things that you really should always check on your bike periodically, as much as you can. Only take you 5-10 minutes. Do it the night before a ride or something, because if one of these points fails on you, the bolt falls out or something, you could be in for a really bad day if you do the wrong thing on the trail and the bolt falls out. Let's get into it.
All right, so first things first, guys, what you always want to check first and foremost is your front and rear tire. You want to make sure that they're not loose, that the axle bolts are not loose on them. You want to make sure that these bolts on your front right here, at least on the 250L, two pinch bolts here as well. And it's just a big Allen key. It's on that side, actually. So that's not going to come out because it threads back in here. But if these two pinch bolts right here are loose, then the friction of your tire spinning around and everything could back that axle out. You don't want that to happen. So your rear tire is the same. It's just a big nut right here. You want to make sure that those are nice and tight because you don't want your wheels to be coming off on you. This right here is the bolt that if you guys saw in the clip that I did earlier at the beginning of the video, this was actually loose. This was so loose that back in the trail that I could unthread it, you know, tighten or loosen it with my fingers. That should never be the case. I always recommend double checking these because imagine if this thing came off, if this fell out in the trail and I hit like a 1 foot, 2 foot jump, got the bike like a foot or two in the air, and this all compressed, it would have completely destroyed this, probably would have busted my rear brake res, or my rear master cylinder, probably would have busted up the line. It would have caused a lot of damage, and it would have probably bent the rear. And these aren't cheap, all for that one bolt. Could have did more damage too, who knows. So highly recommend always double check all your frame bolts. You got this one here, you got the ones here in the front, okay? Kind of hard to see that one because it's where the skid plate is. Got them on the same side, on the other side as well. Always double check those if you can. If you can check them once a month, just go over the bike and just make sure everything's nice and tight. That's what I highly recommend. It's my own stupid fault for not double checking those. I mean, I take a lot of time and effort in keeping all my brakes, you know, all my calipers nice and clean and greased up. And I do the same thing with my lower link here. This is another one. This is very important. Make sure that these bolts are always tight. And if you can, when you do that, maybe once every couple months, once every 3 months, all depends on how much riding you do in water and sand and everything. At every point of these bolts, okay, there's a bearing. So 3 here in the rear, 1 in the front. There's bearings on those. And when you're riding in a lot of creek beds and everything, it's going to tend to wash that stuff out. So I highly recommend taking these out, cleaning the bearings, and then repacking them with grease. And the life of these bearings are going to last you so much longer. Same as the wheel bearings. If you guys are taking your wheels off for any given reason, I highly recommend clean the dust shield, you know, underneath, clean the bearings and all that stuff, repack them with grease. This bike's got over 10,000 miles on it now, and it's running on the OEM wheel bearings. They're not loose. They don't shake. They make zero noise. Everything is good to go. Clean them, repack them, and they will last 10 times longer than they would if you never did that. So that's another point. Your lower link, it connects to your rear shock and everything here. Always make sure these bolts are tight because, again, if one of these were to fall out, man, you'd be screwed in the trail. You could severely injure yourself. You can do a lot of damage to the bike, all because of this one bolt here, which I'm kind of glad that that happened because that's the only thing I never really paid too much time and effort in doing, which was going over the bike. I would only go over the bike maybe once every 6 months or something, twice a year, and just go through and just make sure all my bolts are nice and tight. Now I think I'm going to try to step that up to at least every other month, maybe once a month if I can, and just go through because it'll literally take you 10-15 minutes just to go through, get all your right sockets, Allen keys and everything out. Even just something as simple as this, you know, these are just like the plastic screws, plastic bolts. If they fall out, you know, you could lose a plastic, whatever. If this bolt right here were to come out, this piece of plastic would just be flapping. You know, it could snag onto your leg. It can snag onto a brush or something in the woods, rip that whole panel off. So I highly recommend always double checking frame bolts, tires, and your suspension bolts, like the rear, in the front as well, here. So you've got these pinch bolts on your front suspension. If you were to loosen these two and these two right here, that's what allows your forks to move. Now, say if you were going to hit a small jump of some sort, and these are loose, enough to where this is going to move, you take the chance of busting your triple trees, you know, upper and lower, because if this one slightly flexes from hitting a jump, it's going to cause this to flex, and you could snap it. It's a pretty soft material. so it would snap and crack pretty easily. Your controls up top, obviously, you want to make sure everything there is nice and tight. These right here, that's very important, especially if you're ripping in the trails pretty hardcore, even if you're going lightly. You know, these can cause you to wreck very easily. Always make sure these are nice and tight. You guys can see another thing that I noticed last ride. Not really a gasket, it's just kind of like a contact so the exhaust stays flush or nice and tight. I must have snagged it on something. It must have just been overhanging a little bit, and I snagged it on something. I had to tuck it up in there like that. I have a replacement, which is right here. Whole thing's a replacement, so I'll probably just go ahead and swap that out. And then your brake lines, calipers and brake lines, man. Always make sure that your calipers and your brake lines are usually tight. I've never had a problem with brake lines actually backing out anyway. It doesn't hurt because when you're riding these things and you're hitting bumps, you're hopping rocks, all that good stuff, this stuff works its way out, even with Loctites and stuff like that. But over 10,000 miles, man, even with Loctite on, I mean, on a bike like this, you know, at least blue, I don't think it really is going to last you 10 years with all the water and the weather, but I could be wrong. You know, maybe somebody else can say, hey, Loctite lasts forever. Thread locker, not Loctite. Loctite's what makes the thread locker, but you guys know what I mean. Other than that, though, guys, that just about does it. Oh, yeah, one other thing. So if you have rim locks, periodically check your rim locks every couple rides, because if you're running lower pressure, your rim locks are going to get loose over time. I would say to check your rim locks, honestly, every ride if you can. If you ride hard, check your rim locks every ride. It doesn't hurt to check it. It takes 2 seconds to check them both, and all you're doing is just snugging them back down, because if this rim lock actually fails or it's loose and you're running a lower pressure and you don't have that tube ballooning against it, putting all that pressure on the back of the rim lock and keeping it nice and secure inside the wheel, these are going to fail on you fairly easily. I don't care what rim lock you have. If this thing is loose and that tire spins ever so slightly on that wheel because this is loose, because you're running a low pressure, you're going to snap this thing off inside the wheel, and then you're going to obviously rip the stem out of your tube, all that. So that's another thing, you know, the nut on the tube stem. You know, check them too, man. One last thing I'll bring to you guys is your front and rear spokes. So I see a lot of people neglect their spokes in tightening. Depending on the amount of riding you do, this all is per person based, depending on how much riding you do. Check your spokes, I'd say at least once every 6 months. At least if you ride lightly. If you do a lot of riding like me and all my buddies do, check your spokes at least. I would check them once a month, maybe once every other month, but I wouldn't really go beyond once every other month, because you're not making your spokes to where they're rock tight, to where they don't move. You don't want to do that. But you also don't want them to be loose, because if your spokes get loose, then you have points of failure and you can bend your rim. A lot of bad stuff can happen if you're hitting a lot of roots and hopping logs and hitting light jumps or big jumps, whatever you hit. That can be a big problem.
All right, well, that basically concludes this video for you guys. I want everybody out there to be riding safe. Don't want a bolt falling out of your bike, somebody getting injured from something stupid like that. So just definitely double check your bike. Make sure everything's nice and solid. You know, that'd be the worst thing. You go out to ride for a couple days with some buddies, man, your bike breaks down 2 days in. You got 4 days of riding or 5 days, you know, it'd be kind of SOL. So you got another bike to bring, awesome. But, you know, better safe than sorry, man. Well, Adventure Zach is out. I will see you guys on the next one. Peace out.